Hi, I'm Rob Vanstone. Welcome to the 62nd edition of the Rider Rumblings video podcast. Each week we pick Rider uniform numbers that correspond with the number of the podcast. So, number 62, Vic Stevenson, L. Johns, Reg Whitehouse, Murray McCormick is 62, yes. And Jim Hobson's former roommate, Frank Landy, wore number 62. We're very honored to have with us today Jim Hobson, former president, CEO of the Rough Riders, former Rider offensive lineman, and on Friday he's officially being enshrined in the Canadian Football Hall of Fame. So I thought it was very timely to have Jim in with us today. First off, Jim, thanks for joining us and congratulations on a very well-deserved honor.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
What are your thoughts as this, part one of the process has taken place? You're announced as one of the inductees. As that day draws closer, what's going through your mind?
Well, I'm starting to realize that I better get ready. It just seemed to come up pretty quickly, and been a great summer, and watching the Riders and at the lake and everything. And so I started working on my speech on the weekend, making some notes, and I'd thought about it, but it's here. And of course, this morning called my mom, told her what time we're picking her up, and my sister, and all those arrangements, and everybody's getting excited. So we're looking forward to it. It's going to be a great time.
Might we see Jim Hobson lost for words? Is it that big of a deal? Maybe not.
Highly unlikely. But it's hard to put into words how you feel about this. It's such a different thing, and a major event, and so I don't want to go on too long. But certainly, there's people you have to thank and acknowledge, and I want to do that. But it'll be fun. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Jim, when I go through it and I try to think of people, how many people you played with, or were coached by, or negotiated contracts with, or who played for the Riders when you were the president and CEO, or were in the Hall of Fame, who you're now joining: Ron Lancaster, George Reed, Jack Abensham, Ed McQuarters, Ken Preston, Gene Mikowski,
Eddie Davis, Bill Baker, Roger Aldag. Yeah, I actually made sure I went through it in my mind last weekend.
Gord Curry.
Yeah, Gord Curry, and then I went and I went through the inductees in the builder and player category, and I knew it was several. The players really that was awesome to see that, and don't forget Tom Shepard, because he'd remind you that.
Yeah, for sure.
And but it really amazing when I was looking at it, and guys I grew up idolizing like Ted Ernest and Al Benisic, and the Ron Atchison, and the list just goes on and on. But pretty cool to be going in there with half a dozen guys I actually played with.
Have you posed for the bust? Is that done?
Yeah,
that's quick.
Murray, it's like big round head, put a little goatee on it. I don't think it's a real tough bust to do, but I'll tell you, my wife told this story the other day. They wanted a picture, and then they said they wanted 360 degrees, so could we send a video? So we're in Mexico at the time. I'm standing out by the pool, and I'm slowly rotating around, and my wife's shooting a video with her cell phone. And I'm sure the neighbors are going, he's finally lost it. Like, what are they doing? So that was the bust, and we'll see what. Tom Shepard actually said to me, "You were at Ed George's induction." I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, they don't need to do a bus. They can just use his as well. You can do both of you."
It's surprising.
Two big bald guys. With
so many of them don't look like the actual player. Like I remember last time I went to it was actually in the old building in Hamilton, and I went through there, and I kind of tried not to look at the name and try to figure out who it was, and my percentages weren't very good as far as figuring out, okay, who is that player? So I hope it's a pretty good likeness.
I know what you mean. No, I remember going through there, and some of them, you knew who it was, but the others, didn't really match up.
The thing on Twitter this week is Ed Reed's, the guy from the Baltimore Ravens, got in, and he's got a full head of hair. It's an amazing bust of this incredible picture. He's going to the Pro Football Hall of Fame.
I saw.
If you look that one up to see if you can maybe grow some hair quickly, and maybe a little too late now. Maybe
it's way too late.
Yeah.
When you look at the Rough Riders these days, what do you make of this team? 1-3 to 4-3, and now people are talking about corn dogs. How do you like this team?
I like them a lot. Good personalities there. I think it starts with J.O. and Dickinson. Craig has just been so refreshing. He's candid. He's honest. I think the players love playing for him because he's so genuine, and they don't want to disappoint him. And obviously he's very inclusive with his coaching staff and the players in terms of what they're doing. So, I think he's doing a very good job. And I think Cody has been, everything that we hope for and probably more. And you just hope the kid doesn't get hurt out there the way he plays, reckless abandon. But, yeah, they're playing well, and their defense is coming around like we thought it would. And I think they're in the middle of it. Well, they are in the middle of it right now. Winnipeg has come back to earth, and but it's funny. We were talking about this morning, and I'd stopped by the Rider office for a minute to do something, and I was talking with Mark, and we were talking about how after you've been around the team for a while, you realize that the GMs and the coaches and that, they divide the season into three. And, we're through the first third, and we're 4-3, but we're 3-3 in the first six. And so, and it used to surprise me. When I started back in 05 as president, I thought every game was a must-win. And then after being around Roy and Kenny and Eric and that, I realized, no, they expect they're not going to win them all. And I remember being on a little bit of a rant about a loss, and Eric said, I don't know why you're that upset. I didn't expect to win this game anyway. And because it was, I had a short week on the road, and he said, you got to be realistic. He said, you play to win the last game, not every game. And and I know the average fan wants to win every one, but reality is we're setting ourselves up well for the season, and it's going to come down to who's left, and if we can stay healthy, we'll be in the hunt, and that's the key, and also you got to catch some breaks and so on. But right now, I feel really good about this team.
Yep. I also think they're heading into Montreal team. Looks like they're going to have another quarterback change. It's not going to be Vernon Adams. It'll probably be Antonio Pipkin, because they've kind of fallen into a spot where they're facing teams that are having questions at quarterbacks right now. Yeah. And they lost to Calgary when Arbuckle played himself. But even with Mike Riley, not questioning him, but the struggles that BC's having and stuff. So they seem to be in a nice position right now to get on a bit of another role to play Montreal then on a bye week, which will be nice things to have.
It's set up well for us, but at the end of the day, it's pro football. Every team wants to win and expects to win, and so you got to go into it thinking that. I remember the year that Hamilton won 2 games, and one of them was against us, and so you can't take anybody for granted. So Montreal's done a pretty good job of exceeding expectations. So I don't think I'd take them real lightly this week.
Stanbick might not play either. There's
with Riders gashed at defensive tackle. And,
that's a big loss.
They got Stanback.
Montreal's in trouble though, because Van Stone picked them to win. So.
Yeah.
Yes, they're and there was a purpose behind that, as I freely admitted to in Brendan Taman's column. Jim, if you're the president and CEO and you see a player like Cody Fajardo come along, and I realize it's not the president and CEO's business to meddle in football, nor is it your business to meddle in what Craig Reynolds is doing now. But if you see that a team has this player, not really entirely dissimilar to what Darian Durant was when he was 27 years old, what do you tell the marketing department? This guy's a gold mine. Like, do you talk to the store? Do you talk to the marketing department and say, look, we can really capitalize on the fact that people love this guy?
You got to be careful. Certainly, he's a dream. He's so engaging, and he's so willing to be out there and talk to people and so on. But you got to be careful because players get hurt and players go through slumps, and so yes, use them, but. I think Craig Dickinson would be the first to say it's still a team game. Cody is a big part of our team. He's a leader of our offense. So you got to be careful. You can't just focus on one guy. Every time we used to do that, they'd get hurt or they'd get traded or they'd get arrested, And I'm not saying that's going to happen with Cody. I can't see that. But you know what I mean? And but he's such an easygoing. I think, hopefully we get him locked up and he's as good as we think he is, because he could be a great asset to us in the community and, of course, on the football field. You mentioned Darian, and yes, they're almost same age and all that kind of stuff. But I think for Darian, he didn't find it as easy to engage with the public. He was, he was very good, but I think he was more reserved. But this kid just seems to be very outgoing. Kind of lets it all hang out and enjoys life, and it's good to see. So, but they got a lot of nice, great personalities. The guy I'd use a lot is Dickinson. I think he's he's a great face, just like Kenny Miller was, and Ken Austin was, and they really represent the club and the province well. One of the staff at the Rider office this morning said to me, he said, Craig, you'd think Craig was born and raised in Saskatchewan, the way he deals with people and the way he understands, but he's got that kind of background,
And this is the team that. Sorry, Mark.
I think one thing with Cody, you might want to be a little leery. He has a football job to do, and it's it's 4.5 hours under the CBA, but they still have work to do. They still have their own time to devote to the game. They have to work at playing the game, and I think maybe if the marketing people and the Riders jump on too hard on them, they may put too much on them. And I think they have to be aware. And I know we've been waiting for a guy in the last couple of years to step up, to be a personality, to be the face of the franchise. But I also think the Riders, and I think Craig realizes that. He's 27. He needs some rest. He needs time. He can't be out there selling a green and white. He's got to be out there playing for the green and making sure they're going to be a good team.
Absolutely. You're right on, and that's his number one job. And even though he seems so well-grounded, you don't want him to start getting beyond himself and what he thinks he is and all that kind of thing. But some guys handle it, and they're just a natural. I think back to Ronnie Lancaster. Ronnie he could deal with anything. He could, talk to the press. George was more reserved. He's quieter and, kept to himself. So everybody's different, but, Craig talks about team all the time, and so I think they're going to want to continue to, talk about all the guys that are out there, and they've got Charleston Hughes and many others that can step up, and this young Shaq is a guy you maybe want to get out there too.
Yeah,
so
he's a good speaker too.
Yeah,
you're watching I know an offensive lineman, you can't help but watch the offensive line. This is an offensive line that's in flux and dealing with injuries almost every day. What do you think of the way they're playing?
I think it's one of the reasons they're winning, because they've had a lot of injuries up front. They've lost to Blake, who is a really solid guard, played both sides, play center. Bladak was out for a while. They've been without their best guy since the start of the season in the bat, and they haven't missed a beat. The young kid Shepley is playing great. Bladak's back. Danny has recovered from his car accident, is playing great. They just have played really well. They're very physical, very aggressive. I don't know who was talking about the other day, Rob. Might have been you in one of your columns, but somebody was talking about, we could move to 4 Canadians if we get everybody healthy, and because Shepley was a tackle, and I don't know if he can play tackle in the pros, but it's nice to see they've got depth. That kid they've been bringing along, they've had him around for a while. Yeah, he's been around, but they say he's a player, so they're a big part of what's happening out there.
Yeah, they're fun. They're a good group of guys. I know I get to interact a little more. Like offensive linemen are always fun. Well, except on the field. I wouldn't want to be getting in the middle of any of them. But in the locker room, you can see there's a lot of joking around. Terran Vaughn seems to be a bit of a personality. I think he's kind of a guy, an interesting story. He lost his job last year basically to Kobe Caulfield.
Right.
And Caulfield, I don't know if Caulfield got hurt or what. Somehow they were shaking things up. And he's back in there, and he's probably playing very well, Rob was saying. And we're both noticed how well he's playing. So they needed, they were a little, I don't know if there was concerns about the offensive line, but they've answered them all. And as I said, Labatt's closer to coming back, maybe in a couple more weeks. We're not quite sure if it's a hip or a groin. It's something in that area. And when he comes out, I don't know what they're going to do. But Philip Blake was a very good player. I think it was underrated how well he played. I
really liked Blake. When they picked him up, I thought maybe he was just getting a little long in the tooth. But he has played really well when he's in there. And I think Danny's maybe having his best year right now. He's an I really like Dan, and junior football and all that, Tom Collegiate and so on. But off the field there isn't a funnier, more engaging. He loves people. He loves to have fun. But when he steps on the field, he is one tough dude. And I know if you had to play against Danny every week, you'd know you were in a game.
What is it about offensive linemen from Tom Collegiate, Jim? Yeah. There's that something special, that magic that takes him to halls of fame.
I guess so. And running back Neil Hughes going into Plaza this year. It's tough North End school and working class. And Danny, he didn't. He didn't go to university, didn't play university ball, and so he's had to fight and scrap, and maybe that's part of it. Neil didn't get drafted. I came out of junior football, and So maybe it's that underdog thing. You just, you want to prove you can play. And but when you look around the city, every high school has turned out some great football players. And even, think about Usher. It wasn't around for a long time, but Chris Getzlaff and others came out of that.
Was it Claremont from Usher?
Yep.
He played quarterback at Usher.
Pretty good graduates.
Bill Baker, Scott Collegiate.
Bill Baker.
Yeah.
Yeah, Scott turned out some Terry Bullich and Terry Hinks, and it was quite a crew. Yeah,
just imagine if we go back to Dan a little bit. What could have happened? He got in that serious car accident. We still haven't been told what happened, other than he was ejected from the car to the truck he was traveling in. And 2 or 3 weeks later, he's back in training camp, and dealing with the physical part and also the mental part, because you can say he's in a car crash every play. So he's probably one of the tougher guys, but to see him bounce back, I think a lot of people showed the support from him, and a lot of people take a lot of pride in what he showed, how to come back from a serious accident. And as you mentioned earlier, he's one of the best speakers on the team, and he started out being 1 and 2 word answer guys, and the community program the Riders have, and I commend him for that, is they get these guys out and they learn how to be public speakers. They learn how to talk to people and to communicate. And Dan Clark's one of those guys who's really stepped up and done that. And Zach Evans and these guys.
I talked to Dan Clark when he played for the Thunder, though. And he was awesome to talk to. Okay. He was great with the Thunder.
Well, I just remember for the Riders he's got.
He is, interesting. Another guy that did a great job in the community was Neil Hughes. And he was kind of shy and quiet when he came out, but man, he did a good job. And Tom Guy, and another one, Kennedy Nikiasen. Remember him?
Yeah.
And Tom and quiet, shy, but you put him in front of a bunch of kids, and he was incredible. And so I think you either step up to the plate or you don't do it. And those guys have really stepped up.
I was working in the stadium recently, and a tour of some bunch of young kids came through, and they said, "Do you have any questions?" As the guy said, "Put him." I said, "Yeah, hi, Zach Evans is my friend, and I'm supposed to say hi to him." And I laughed, because Zach Evans, when he goes out there, he tells every school he goes to, says, "Hi, I'm Zach Evans. You can now call me your friend." And this little guy got up there. So it's kind of a neat moment to see this little guy put his hand up. But Zach was long gone, but it was still a moment.
It is cool when the kids, and whether they're young kids or older kids, and a lot of times special needs kids, will engage with you away from the stadium, whether it's in a restaurant or whatever, and it's really touching to and they're very sincere, and you're my friend, and I think that's very good. By the way, you mentioned Zach. That's a loss. His stats don't make you think that this guy is one of their best, but he just is so solid, and they're not going to run much in the middle with Zach in there, but if Henry can stay away from the dumb penalties, he's a pretty good ball player.
I think this DeBuyer kid's a kid to watch out for, too.
Is that right?
He came in, he had 3 defensive tackles. I think he might have had a little better game than Henry. Henry has the dumb penalty. He's got that one where he leaned his shoulder into the guy on the sidelines, 2 on the tripping penalty. I haven't seen a tripping penalty very often. And then the roughing pass, and he got a credit for a sack that Rob thinks
he tripped over the offensive lineman.
Yeah, that was another one you're talking about. Yeah. And that tripping was, you're right, it's not that it isn't called, but you don't see it very often.
Knee on knee, but he's also a big community guy, too. And
yes.
I think he works with Scott, puts in thousands of hours over there at Scott Collegiate with all the kids like that, tries to help kids get scholarships, he's shooting videos. He's a 2-time Tom Pate nominee for the team. So he's another one of these community guys. But the shoulder into the quarterback in Ottawa, again, that sideline was dumb. That was just, why was he thinking of that?
Jim,
he's a defensive lineman.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you look around the league, or even at the Rough Riders, no sellouts yet this year. Attendance in the league is down in a lot of markets. There, we just got 20,000 for the first Battle of Alberta. If you were still president, CEO, and I know you're still have a very keen interest in the league, would you be concerned about this? And do you have any solutions in mind?
Absolutely, I'd be concerned, because we're still a bums and seats league, and the TV deal is fine, and sponsorships are fine, but we need fans in the seats, and I'm not disappointed here. I mean, we had 29,000 plus sold for Thursday, and a Thursday night. That's pretty darn good, when you think about the travel, and I have to really give a shout out to the Riders and Evraz, Tim Reed and Craig Reynolds, the way they worked together and had that promotion, that was great. And we were there. We went to the concert before Tom Cochran, and then went to the game, and it was just it was a lot of fun. And we were there Wednesday night too. So, but when you look at Calgary and Edmonton, and 20,000 people, that's a concern because of the rivalry. And we can talk about BC not being a contender this year, and that hurts them. But also, Toronto has struggled, and so a lot of things happening. And equity, or whatever you want to call it, balanced play is very important. But it's still concerning. I think they're doing the right things. But I think we also have to maybe go back to some of the things we did in the past, which was what the Riders have always done, which is engagement with the community. One of my pet peeves, and I can't point fingers because I was part of some of these decisions around contracts and CBA and so on. We need our players to stay in their communities longer, be part of the communities. And you think back, and geez, we're sounding old, but you could.
Well, Murray is old.
Yeah, but you could literally list the starting offense and defense of the Riders from year to year. You knew who was going to be Bill Baker, and on and on and on. And it doesn't mean we have to have guys stay their whole career in one place, but the 1-year contracts, and so guys come in, guys are here, they're gone, and the guys we were talking about, who are we talking about? Dan Clark and Zach and Neil, and they're the ones that live here. But we also had a lot of Americans that have done that and stayed here, and John Chick and others that Weston Dressler. Yeah, so I think that's important, is allowing the fans to bond with players and be part of the team. So I think that would be something I'd want to see, a little longer term contracts, keep guys in one place. The Riders are doing a lot of good things on game day. You got to love the experience is good, and there's no reason we can't do that across the league. But there's so many options. If you live in Toronto, you're not only competing with the Blue Jays, now the Raptors, are there, and soccer. I think Randy Ambrosi has the right idea about engaging new Canadians and so on, because in places like Toronto, Montreal, and Vancouver, the new Canadians are a huge percentage of the population, and they're going to love soccer, but they've embraced basketball, and you can't tell me that they couldn't do the same thing with the CFL if we had the right people out there.
Walk around Wascana Lake any night of the week, and there's so many new Canadians. You see, you see how many people have moved here when you walk around the lake at night, and the new Canadians are just everywhere, and you can see that they're just loving it, and that's a market that's.
I go across the league, and I see the game day product from every team. And Toronto's game day product stands up to anyone across the league. They do everything you can possibly do to entertain the fans. And I know some people are complaining about the Thursday night. I kind of like the Thursday night where they've gone to the concert series, and I know Rob complains about the guy leading the cheers and stuff, but that's the way it is now. You've got to entertain people in between whistles. At
the expense of their hearing?
Yes, too bad. But yes,
that's entertaining.
Sorry, Grandpa. Get used to it, buddy. It's going to be the way it is. And I think that's because if I haven't been to a Raptors game, my wife did. As you said, it's the same thing at a Raptors game. There's not a moment of silence from the time the whistle blows, well, even before then. And that's what it is now. That's what the kind of game is. And you guys recognize it's a social time. And I know, to go back, when you were building the stadium, you built the Pilsner Zone. And what is that all about? That's all recognizing that I hate to say young people, they want to talk and they want to socialize, and that's what they want to do. And when people see Mosaic Stadium on TV now, there's a lot of empty seats, but the concourse is packed.
Yep.
And it's people socializing and doing that kind of thing. And then in the fourth quarter, they kind of head back to their seat if there's a good game for football. I think
the Pilsner Place was something we knew that was going to be successful. The big concourses are so important because people do want to stand and talk and visit and buy a hot dog or whatever. And so we're doing the right thing. I think most of the teams are. I know Toronto has worked really hard to do a good job. I had an experience here just a week or two ago. We were going out and called for Uber, actually. Ooh. And the driver was a new Canadian, and I walked out, and he said, Mr. Hobson, and he knew who I was. Wow. And I thought, that's not about Jim Hobson, that's about the Riders, that he has obviously bought into the Riders. And so I thought I was really happy to see that. And I think that the future is that, and certainly the kids. I know I'm like Rob sometimes. Geez, could just show me another replay. I don't need another contest. Yeah. But the reality is, that's what keeps people engaged. That's why people are going to the games, because it's really the experience. You go to the fair for the experience and to mingle with people, and it's a social event. But we've got to find ways to get them in. I like that they've lowered prices in some places and doing the things that have to be done in their market. Huh?
Here's the problem with the noise. Oh, sorry.
Just to say, the fair was awesome. It was a cool atmosphere to walk in there. The great concert by Tom Cochran, who between you and me could use a haircut.
Yeah,
this kind of thing. I know he goes for a little rough and tough and stuff, but he was great. But it was interesting too, because we saw all the families and stuff going to the game. Rob, I left after the game, 11:30, 11:45. It's a whole other world. There's these groups of kids and stuff, and different groups of people compared to when we were there for the family part of it. But it was very cool. I thought it was well done. I think it was we were worried about parking. They handled parking as well as they could, because we always worry about parking in Saskatchewan.
You parked in Grand Coulee.
Yeah, but we needed the exercise after the. You wouldn't even stop me for mini donuts. I'm still haven't forgiven you for that.
They did a good job. Tim and his staff did a really good job, and I know Craig worked and the rider staff worked with them. And you're right, I enjoyed it. We walked around Kittyland and watching the young families and just they were smart when we didn't come out that way. We came out on the east side, but. My friend who sits on the west side said they dumped us right into the fair. We didn't get to go outside. Yeah. They had to go into the food court. Well, of course, what did everybody want to do at 11 o'clock at night?
I just wondered, can we imagine that kind of atmosphere for the Grey Cup? Do you think they could possibly get away with that kind of? Maybe the plan. I know the plans are coming to.
It's going to be a self-contained village.
Yeah,
I think that I thought that the Grey Cup in 13 was incredible, and you couldn't beat it. But I think they can beat it because they've got the facilities now. That new International Trade Center. Yeah. I mean, that is beautiful. So just there's no reason that you have to go outside of that venue and between the stadium and I was over there this morning, as I said, and they're starting the Garth Brooks thing, getting ready for that, and so much going on. Yeah, there's no and as you said, parking and of course drinking and driving, and we've come so far with the buses now. And I got friends actually saying, are you still driving? I said, and we have friends that live out in the east side of Regina. They take the bus to the North Gate because the North Gate is a quick run. They say it just goes straight up. And they park there, and we drive home on the Ring Road. Said no big deal. So people's mindset about parking is starting to change, and using the buses and using the ride services, and so I think that really is going to help us.
Those friends you mentioned, Jim, are some of them friends in low places? I had to get that in. See, I'm not just a jazz guy.
Yeah,
Jim, Garth Brooks here Friday, Saturday. You were the president CEO when stadium concerts in Regina were pioneered. Rolling Stones, nearly 13 years ago. What are your recollections of you and your close friends, Nick and Keith?
I remember
and Charlie.
It almost killed us, it's a great memory, and it was a great experience. But we just had no background and no resources, and so all of a sudden the Rolling Stones are here, and we sell out in 28 minutes or whatever it was. And of course, we didn't have the technology, and we didn't have the equipment and the training and so on. But anyway, and I remember the people that were so angry they didn't get tickets, and they stood in line. And anyway, and so we went through that, and then we did the second show, and that kind of took some of the pressure off because they got the seats out. But it was incredible, and being the president, I was literally standing at the bottom of the stairs when Mick and those guys came out, and so it was a great experience, and it almost killed. My CFO had just started, Mike Mack at the time, and I think he didn't go home for 2 days, and they were counting money all the time and just going. And Liz Meisner and her staff, we ended up doing all the sales of merchandise for the Rolling Stones. I think they gave us 5%, but hey, we needed the money. So, but it was great. And then we did McCartney and in the improved Taylor Field with the Mosaic Taylor Field with the temporary stands and that was great. And there was just Kid Rock. You go back and you think of all the concerts that we've had here in the last 13 years, all because of that Rolling Stones concert that was. I think that was I know it was the largest grossing location in their 2-year tour that the Stones had.
What a Friday night, though. Remember that Friday night, wearing golf shirts and just sitting there watching the Rolling Stones and so glad we didn't have to go Sunday because they were wearing parkas.
We
Sunday.
did, yeah, and I got to see the Sunday show a little more. Friday, I literally was running around and just seeing the things. Funny story. I walked outside the stadium. There was a lot of things going on, and I walked out and I wanted to walk around during the concert, and I walked into North Central on the north side, and there's people out there, and it was great to see. And one of the young guys looked at me and goes, "Hey, Mr. Hobson, what are you doing out here?" I said, "Just checking out things," and they're like, "Well, the concert's in there, you can go in there."
One of the things I remember, I mean, you handled so many situations at the peak of happiness, and there were some tough situations, and you handled them all with composure, professionalism, everything that's kind of blazed your trail into the Hall of Fame. The only time I ever saw you, even a sign that you might have been frazzled, was Rolling Stones, 2006. Am I recalling and reading this correctly?
I think you're right, because it was so outside the box for us. I mean, we're good at putting on a football game and what goes with that, but the expectations, like people were, they were in a frenzy, like they really were, and they got there like hours before, and it was just like you could just and there were people crying before the concert. They were crying and all kinds of things going on. And of course, you got the people that think they have special access and all that kind of thing. But by the end of the night, everybody was so happy. It was magical. I actually was invited after the second performance to a private party that Mick Jagger was throwing. I didn't go.
What?
I didn't go. I just wanted to go home. I was whipped. I really did. I just said, I can't. I'm done. And
Mick must have been so disappointed.
I'm sure.
Yeah, that's true.
Now
you wish you'd gone.
I was kind of surprised I was invited.
Usually they pick out the young women in the crowd and invite him to their parties.
He had handlers that did that, went around and invited people, the beautiful people. And I wasn't on the beautiful people list.
I remember another cool part of that concert was they started on time.
Yeah.
I think it was 8:15 they started.
Yeah.
Boom, they were out there. Because Paul McCartney started about 90 minutes late. And I remember he said, "I was just waiting for all the buses to get here. Sorry about that, folks."
Yeah, I remember
okay.
that.
Yeah, well, that's all right. That's good enough. Then he played for 3.5 hours. And
One of the worst that I've seen. We went to Madonna in Toronto a few years ago, and at the hockey rink, and I think she was supposed to go on at 8, and she came on at 10:30. Wow. I just thought that was so disrespectful.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
And when we, of course, being from Regina, I show up at 6 o'clock. We're ready to go. We got our tickets, and there's nobody there yet. And the ticket taker said, "You might want to wait for a while." I said, "Why?" "Well, she didn't come on till after 10 last night." And I'm going, "That's 4 hours from now."
So what do you call the wait? The pre-Madonna.
There we go.
That was his first concert, so he felt like a virgin at it.
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
New lows, new record.
Can we have Mark Melnichuk? Can we edit that out? Murray's gone to low places. Anything else you'd like to add, Jim, with this very momentous week in a career full of momentous occurrences? Anything else you'd like to mention?
Of reflection. So happy that my mom is here to be with me on this. It's funny. We were out in the lake yesterday. We had a wonderful weekend. We had a pontoon boat, and we had a bunch of friends out, and we were tied up. And one of my friends asked me about it. Said, "Hey, you're going to Hamilton this week, yeah?" And they said, "Any regrets?" I said, "No, I've had a wonderful life, no regrets." And I said, "No, actually, I have one regret." And they said, "What's that?" I said, "That my dad isn't here to see this, And my dad died, like yours, Rob, a long time ago. He was 54 years old, and so much of the good, exciting things that have happened, he wasn't here to share." And so that's a regret. But on the other hand, my mom's here. One of my sisters is coming. Overall, our family's had a very good life, and I still, if you'd have told me when I was coming out of high school that I'd one day play with the Riders and be the president of the Riders, I'd have, bet the farm that wasn't going to happen. So it's been magical and great, a great tribute, I think, to the people that led me and mentored me. And I was thinking about those Hall of Famers I played with, and, several of them weren't the best athletes on the team. Ronnie, George, Roger Aldag, undersized and all that. What did they have in common? you couldn't beat them. They just refused to be defeated, and I think maybe that's what they taught me: is never give up, never quit, and that's kind of carried me through life. That belief that you just you keep going even when you think you can't anymore. You got to just be tough and never lose.
This time, I presume you're going to the after party.
Yeah. Well, the problem is we're all old.
It's at 6:30.
Murray knows, like, we're in Mexico, like, 9 o'clock's a late night,
No, it's just getting started at 9 p.m.
It's funny in Mexico, all the good bands like the Gecko Band, who we saw twice last week, they play from like 2 till 5 in the afternoon, or
perfect.
The latest they'll play is 7 at night, 7 till 10, and that's it. They're gone. Everybody's gone home, huh?
Yeah.
I went to El Salvador and saw a contra band. These jokes are terrible. Murray, anything you want to save this podcast before I tell more jokes?
I want to mention what happened. I was walking along the seawall last week in Vancouver, and there's a young teenage guy wearing a Rider jersey. And I just mentioned to me, who do you think's going to win? And he said, he kind of mentioned, and then he said, it kind of caught me. He said, I watch the podcast,
Really?
And he says he never misses it. And I wish
What's his name? We should say hello to him.
I know. I wish I'd gotten his name, but we just kind of wandered off. But I just thought, it's so cool that someone watches a podcast that watches it religiously. He's from Kipling, and I just forgot to get his name, but I decided to give him a little nod to thanks for listening, and you got to mention on the podcast. Wish I knew your name. Sorry.
Remember the Beverly Hillbillies? Somebody asked Jethro if he liked Kipling, and he said, "I don't know. I've never kippled." These jokes are terrible. I apologize. For Murray McCormick, Canadian Football Hall of Famer Jim Hobson, and unfortunately me, thanks for being with us. Murray, please read the
sure, I have to do.
I'm so sorry for these jokes.
If you enjoy the podcast, please leave a review and a 5-star rating. It helps us grow the podcast. You can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, whatever that is, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to send us a question, you can email Rob at rvanstone@postmedia.com, and hopefully we'll read one of them on the show. First one we get. You can follow Rob on Twitter at Rob Vanstone, or me at MurrayLP, and I think Jim is Twitterless.
That's right.
Facebookless? Oh, you Facebook guy.
Do you have a burner account at least?
No.
I don't even think about those kind of things.
Must be a nice life to lead.
It is.
Yes. The life of a Hall of Famer. For Murray and Jim, I'm Rob. We'll do this again next week if I'm allowed to host another one. Number 63. Take care.